Hello, can you, you're connecting. I'm surprised nobody else is on. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen. Share. Can you see my,
Hello.
can you see my screen? Probably not.
Hi,
Screen.
this
Oh, sorry,
th-
I'm just trying to set up my screen share. Go ahead.
this is Bogdan. I just want to make sure you guys can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you. So let's see, we've got 11:58, so 2 minutes. People are just starting to join. 5 people. We had like, shoot, we had like, shoot, sorry. We had like 29 people.
Oh, nice.
So how we did 6. Yeah, I know, you never know with summer, people are popular week for taking vacations and stuff. So appreciate that you're doing this. We haven't done this Creo View subject, and I think there's a lot of stuff there that people could use in their jobs. Creo people, I think,
Yeah.
tend to just think that Creo View is, just beneath them or something, but it, it is really handy. And I had said on Facebook and our LinkedIn groups that we use it a lot at my job because we're working in a 5,000 part assembly. Everybody's working in our little team is working in this assembly. It takes me 20 minutes to load it. And then it's very slow to rotate or move around, zoom in and zoom out. Whereas Creo View, it takes 5 minutes to open, and I can, spin that thing all over the place, and highlight things. And I don't use it much more than that, but I'm not the only one at my company. We all, it's kind of a common practice. So it's very useful. How are we doing on time? 11:59. So I'll start going through our little PowerPoint. How many people? 13 people. And then I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Sure, yeah, sounds good.
So just want to point out that we're in Milwaukee. This is our 30th year of Badgerland User Group. TriStar Bogdan is speaking on Creo View, and you should be muted, but feel free to speak, especially if we've got a smaller group. We've got 14 now. So these are some of our vendors, supporters, TriStar today. This is Badgerland User Group, kind of geographical area. We do have dues. These are some of our venues. So we did have an in-person meeting it's more than a month ago, April 26th at WCTC, Waukesha County Technical College in Pewaukee. We ended up only having about 60 people. So it was a lot of work to put this together. We had 15 presentations, probably 30 people supporting the group. So I was disappointed by the attendance. And so we're not going to have another in-person until at least next April, until I can guarantee that we have like 100 people, because it's just not worth having people fly in from, 5, 6, 7 different places across the US, driving in from Chicago, and then only 60 people show up. So just want to put that out there. Don't have the next Zoom. It'll be at least 4, 5, 6 weeks, probably sometime early August. And then we have this Windchill CAD admin roundtable. That's next week, Friday at 11 a.m. If you want some more information on that, just send me an email. Here's my LinkedIn profile, and my email address is here. You can also join our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Just look for Badger UG or Badger Land User Group, something like that. Oh yeah, and then one of the thing I wanted to mention, I'm on the board of directors of PTC User, and they have announced that the yearly called Global Summit will be in New Orleans last week of January. So I'm going to stop sharing. If you have any questions, go ahead and speak up. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Bogdan. So let's see, right now we've got, of course, now I can't see how many people. It looks like we've got a pretty good crowd. So I'm going to mute myself and go over to my other computer. So let me know if you have any questions. And thank you so much, TriStar, for supporting this.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start putting my screen here in full screen. Thanks for having me on. My name is Bogdan Kadzillo. I'm on the pre-sales team here at TriStar. And I don't usually use the Zoom. Everyone these days uses the Teams, so bear with me here. But if you have any questions as I'm going through here, I'll probably get through a lot of the material. It's very easy to use. Hopefully easy to follow along. I believe this is also being recorded, so you can always come back and see any picks and clicks that you want to review in the future that you may have missed today. I'm just going to go through this application, Creo View. So you may have used it in the past. You may not have heard of it. You may have used just a little piece of the functionality, but we think this is a pretty powerful tool to visualize the data that you have either in Windchill or you're creating in Creo, or if you're using other CAD software that this viewer can open. Typical things are like SolidWorks or CATIA or the Siemens and X products, Autodesk, Inventor, or AutoCAD. You can use this as a viewer to look at those informations. So we're going to go through kind of what is it, what can it do. We're going to look at some typical functionality that is used by people across various roles. So this is not a tool only for engineers. This is actually a tool for everyone else within your organization. And you can use this viewer with Windchill if you have the Windchill PLM software, whether you're using it just for CAD data management or whether you're using it for managing more of your product development data and processes. Or you can also use this viewer standalone. So a lot of times you may send some information to somebody. They can use this viewer to take a look at that information. There's different licensing levels, but essentially there are three types of viewer functionalities. There's the Express, the Lite, and the MCAD. So we'll go through each of those and see what that means, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. This is a fairly easy piece of software to use, so hopefully you'll find it that it could apply to what you're doing in your environment. I have a little asterisk on the Express because that is a free viewer that you can download. So there's a hyperlink down here off of PTC's website. Anybody can install this viewer. It works on Windows systems. I don't know if anybody's using Linux these days in their workplace, but it works on your Windows systems. And you can install this and view the models when either somebody sends you a model or you find something online that you want to open that's been generated in the format that Creo View supports, and I'll go through what that means. What is Creo View? So Creo View is essentially a visualization technology. PTC created this to have people look at the 3D models, 2D drawings. Now it supports PDFs, it supports images. So if you have these either in Windchill or outside of Windchill, and someone sends you the model, you can use this viewer to take a look at it. Now you can do a lot more things with different levels. So with the Express viewer, you can pretty much view information, interrogate it. With some of the other viewer functions on the Lite and the MCAD versions, you can do a lot more things. You can actually build assemblies by bringing parts together from scratch. You can start animating things and so on. So this viewer it's intended to quickly share information with others. So if I'm an engineer, I'm creating a lot of this data. I'm putting it into Windchill, or I'm putting it on, in my folder or some other PDM repository. But I want to share that information to others. Typically people do it either through PDFs, step files. They take pictures, they take screenshots. And depending on the downstream user, what they need to do with this data, you can send this data to them in a more lightweight format. So if you have a large assembly, sending step files, you're going to have hundreds of megabytes or of data that you need to send. And they need to have a viewer that opens and is able to view this step file. PTC created this to allow you to send a much higher quality but a lower sized file. So whenever someone creates a Creo View representation, this is a format that PTC created that compresses the original to anywhere from 5 to 20% of the original size. So if I'm sending a 1 gigabyte design internally for someone else to take a look at, that may only be 200 megabytes, might only be 100 megabytes, might be 50 megabytes compressed. So some users use this to look at really large drawings or really large assemblies, 5,000 component PCB, for example, with multiple layers. That's not very easy to visualize, and you need to have a pretty powerful computer to be able to spin it properly and rotate it and zoom in and interrogate it if you need to. So it's a viewer that allows kind of the sharing of information and someone to interrogate that information in a very lightweight format, quicker, faster. You don't need a CAD software to take a look at things that were done in CAD. So where can you use this? Well, you could use it for design reviews. You could use it for sharing information internally. If you don't have the CAD software, you can look at CAD information if you need to. You can also look at multiple things together at the same time. You can have multiple windows. So it's very similar to other viewers on the market, but this is kind of PTC's technology to share information that's created in the PTC tool set. If you're a Windchill user, every Windchill user has access to this viewer. The Windchill comes with Creo View Lite. Express is kind of something you would install and have someone who's not part of your organization take a look at the information you send them. Creo View Lite is, if you're using Windchill, you could use this viewer. You can also purchase Creo View Lite if you don't have Windchill, and it gives you some additional functionality. The Creo View MCAD gives you even more functionality. Sometimes things that you might be doing in your CAD software, you could probably also do it within Creo View MCAD. Such as searching for things, interrogating models, cross sections, and so on. So what does Creo View do? So it allows you to view 3D models, product structures, any metadata that's in the 3D model. So think of parameters or attributes. Now, the important thing also becomes sometimes you may not want to send all of your information. You might want to strip out the metadata, or maybe just create a like a graphical view of the part or assembly, not having anyone having the ability to measure or take cross sections or reverse engineer your parts. You can do this. You can set up Windchill, you can set up Creo to create these viewables in a graphical format only, what I call graphical format. So it'll strip out all of the geometry details, all of the metadata, and only send somebody just kind of something to view, something to look at, to spin and rotate, zoom in and zoom out, just to get enough detail that they need. So there are ways of protecting your intellectual property with Creo View. For administrators, there's also a way to simplify the menus. So if you don't want people to have access to the measurement functionality, in the later, or not the later, but in the Creo View MCAD license, people can actually start converting. So if they open up a Creo model, they can actually start converting to step files or converting to, you know, a 3D PDF or something like this, that they can then, you know, use it for something else. But as an administrator, you can disable that functionality. So there are ways to edit the menus for users that you don't want them to kind of send data out if this is a very highly sensitive, you know, intellectual property that you have, but still you want them to use the viewer to take a look at this information that you send them. There is also an ECAD component of this viewer. So just like the MCAD, the mechanical CAD, there's also the electrical CAD. So if you are creating things in printed circuit board design tools like Cadence or Siemens Expedition or the Altium product or the Zuken product, you can actually visualize those, interrogate the boards, interrogate components, take a look at reference designator information, take a look at package information, naming information on components. You can also take a look at the traces, the silk screen information, typical things you have in your Gerber files. You can actually load Gerber files into this viewer to take a look at information that you might be interested in. With Creo View MCAD, you can actually compare the printed circuit board design that comes from one of the layout tools with the 3D CAD model that you might have. So you might have a Creo CAD model, you might have a SolidWorks CAD model. Especially with a Creo CAD model, you can actually interrogate and cross-highlight. So let's say I pick a resistor, it'll actually highlight it on the 3D model and on the PCB board, and it'll actually tell me what layer it's on, is it or even the side of the board, and what the component details are. So for design reviews, for things that are changing, for highlighting things, it's a great tool. You can also view PDF documents and mark them up. So this viewer is great because if you store PDFs in Windchill, for example, you can actually open these with the viewer and start marking it up in case there's a change or there's some type of a review that you want to involve others with, and save these markups back into Windchill so they're logged and anyone can go back who has access to it and review them in the future. So you can capture your decisions, your review details as a markup for not only just the 3D, the electrical, the drawings, but also PDFs. On the drawing side, if you're creating 2D drawings, whether that's a vector file like an HPGL from Creo, or you're publishing them to PDFs, you can also mark up in View with this viewer these drawings. There are also comparison options with this viewer. So you can compare what's different between different revisions or different iterations of a part or a 2D drawing or an ECAD design. So there are add-ons that are kind of industry specific to what you need to do. If you're using routed systems or the schematics tool in Creo, you can also look at electrical schematics with the viewer, and again, mark them up and interrogate them. If you have requirements for MBD or model-based designs, where you're putting 3D dimensions and geometric tolerances and annotations on the actual 3D model itself, some other tools may call it PMI information. Creo View can read this information. You can, especially from Creo, you can look at information that's been published in different view states, if you're creating different annotations and view states, and bring back those view states and annotations so you can cycle through, similar to cycling views on a drawing. The viewer is great. You can have 12 windows at the same time. That means you can load the same model, you can load different models, you can also load different objects. So you can have a PDF in one window, you can have a 3D model in another window, you can have a drawing in another window. So if you have a large screen, let's say in a conference room or for a review, you can kind of actually bring up a lot of these things at the same time without having to, typical thing is taking presentations, screenshots, pulling up a CAD software and opening up a model one by one. You can actually do this much quicker within the viewer. So you can do this all either with connecting to Windchill or as a standalone viewer, opening it, creating annotations, and saving it somewhere locally to your folders. So this is essentially Creo View. If I open up a published model, this is opening up, this would be an example of opening up either different objects. So I can open up a drawing, I can open up a 3D model, I can open up a PDF separately and displaying them in one session in different windows. But I can also open up a Windchill part. So if I have a Windchill part that has described by documents or CAD models that are driving that part, 2D drawings associated to those CAD models, all of these can come in one shot through my publishing mechanism and be visible to me in this viewer. So for example, I can in this case, I put 4 windows of the main screen to show me model information, document information. In one window, I can have 2D drawings. In another window, I can have an associated PDF or document that has been published to a PDF. In another window, I can have from Creo a simplified rep, or I can have a view state that's been created through the combination views functionality. I can also create exploded views from, if I have exploded views that are used on drawings, I can also show those exploded views in one of these windows. And finally, I can see the full assembly structure, the parts. I can also see the attribute information. So if I put in things like materials, descriptions, whatever parameters I'm using on my CAD models, when you create this Creo View representation, I can see that attribute information also shown either as I click through each part in the viewer or just in a table, in a column rather, beside my part number. And I can kind of interrogate and search for parts that are of a certain material. I can search for parts that have a certain name. So if I'm looking for an M8 screw, or if I'm looking for some kind of an ISO manual that I have associated, some SOP manual that I've associated to one of these standard components, I can see this information in the window and interrogate it. So before I get kind of into the viewer and show you what it looks like, I wanted to also highlight kind of the technology stack that this viewer is based on. So, kind of the core viewing technology is essentially the technology behind all of these different type of viewers. There's different licensing for people, different access rules in Windchill if you're using the PLM system that will allow certain people to see and use certain viewers. The Creo View Express is kind of the free viewer for everyone. That does not plug into Windchill. So the free viewer does not communicate to Windchill. Every Windchill user has Creo View Lite. This is what communicates to Windchill. All of these viewers are essentially the same exact interface, except that as you move up the stack, you get additional functionality that you don't have in the previous type of viewers. So where would you use Creo View Express? Well, this is for someone who you send files to that's not in your Windchill, or if you're not using Windchill, someone you send files to from your Creo session. So you can export out your Creo models or just Creo View models from your Creo session and then send that file out to somebody to take a look at. They just need to install Creo View Express and they can look at it. When you're exporting native files like parts and drawings, there's some config.pro options you need to be able to have people look at these and see them correctly in Creo View Express. So especially for drawings, you need to have a config.pro option that takes a snapshot of the drawing. And of course, if you send a drawing, you have to send the 3D models because the way Creo works is the drawing is the downstream deliverable from the 3D model. So if you don't have the 3D model and you just have a drawing, you can't do anything with it. So you got to send it as a package. Now, sometimes if you have thousands or hundreds of parts in that assembly, you don't want to send the whole assembly. So when you convert it to Creo View format, this allows you to automatically create a zip file that has everything, and you're just sending one file to the person. So you might have an assembly of thousands of components and you just send them one file. Now, those thousands of components may also include drawings. So if you want to send a drawing with all the parts, again, it's just one file. So it's really convenient. When you're using Creo View Lite with Windchill, you need to make sure that the publication, the published model is available. So when you have a preview, you can open up in Creo View. If you don't have a preview, you have to start publishing that model to convert it to a Creo View format. Now, even if you are in Windchill and you need to download that model, you can also do it as a single file. So if you have a large assembly, you can open it up with the viewer, but if you want to look at it offline, you can also download that view of that model and then use either Creo View Lite or Creo View Express. Once you move up to Creo View MCAD or Creo View ECAD, this is more for people who have to interrogate models and do other things on a more frequent basis. So you can upgrade to some of these tools and they give you additional functionality for searching, for drawing comparisons, 3D CAD comparisons. There's other things in there for doing, for example, modules for animation, modules for design check and interference analysis, and so on. So let me kind of get into the viewer itself. So here I opened up my Windchill screen and I have some CAD models in my Windchill environment. So one way to take a look at these CAD models is if I have a thumbnail that shows me the CAD model, I can use my Creo View application to open up this CAD model. So this CAD model is checked into Windchill, and this is a compressed viewable off of that CAD model. So again, this is anywhere from 5 to 20 percent of the size of the original model. Some models compress really, really well, and some models that have a lot of geometry, they still compress, but not as much as others. So you'll have different variations on sizes, but you don't need the CAD software. So this one has been created by Creo. You don't need that CAD software to open this. So let me kind of go into the end product where this model is stored. And I'm going to launch my Creo View environment. So there's a icon here. If I'm just browsing through files and looking at thumbnails, that launches Creo View. So let me do that. So this may be undergoing change, so it's telling me that my visualization is out of date, but for this demo purpose, I'm okay. I'm going to continue viewing it. I'm not going to worry about if I'm looking at the latest or not. So I'm going to launch my Creo View application. So that allows me to log in to Windchill. Most browsers these days don't allow you to launch third-party plugins and authenticate using just the browser authentication, using the previous session's browser authentication. So I need to log in with proper credentials to my server from Creo View itself. Once you log in once, you don't have to keep logging in when you want to look at other models. So kind of the first time you do it when you have your Windchill session open, and you can just kind of start loading models as you need to. So when my Creo View session opens, it starts downloading that assembly that I requested. So this is a few hundred megabyte assembly. It has quite a bit of parts in there, and it came up in just a few seconds from my server. So this is going to, using this viewer is going to be a lot faster to open up CAD models than using your CAD software, because your CAD software has to be, opening up the model, rebuilding, regenerating the geometry so it's correct, so you can continue designing and interrogating the model. This is geometry correct, but it's a compressed version, so it's fairly quick, and I can rotate it fairly quickly. I have a lot of detail. So for example, if I zoom in, right, I have a lot of detail in here on individual components. Now, there's a lot of things I can do with this viewer. So one of the things I can do is just, spin and rotate. Another thing in the viewer I can do is take a look at the assembly structure. I can also turn on some columns that may be of interest to me. So some of these parts have a description or a name. No matter what it is called, I can preset what my company is using as a description and what attribute value it is and what attribute it is actually pulling, and display it in the tree. So for example, some of these have some of the attributes that I might be interested, like material. So for example, in the viewer, I can take a look at some of those parts with that material. Now there is a search box. So for example, I can search based on attribute. I can search based on part name. You can also search based on spatial, spatial or proximity to a certain component. Right? Show me everything within 5 inches from that component as my search result. In this case, for example, I can start searching based on attributes. So let's use that material. So one of the typical material attributes is PTC material name coming from Creo in this case. And I'm going to look for something that has the keyword steel in its name. So when I hit apply, in case I'm ignoring cases, I'm just using whatever attribute it found, and it found 47 parts here that have that attribute value, right? So they're all listed here. So I can, for example, highlight some of these parts or all of these parts, and for example, select them in the product structure. Where are they? Right. So in this case, I just kind of told it just to look for steel, exact word, doesn't matter what the case is. And it found those components in my structure somewhere. So this is any viewer that you use, whether it's Express, Lite. You can do this kind of search and search for components. You can save your queries as well. You can save these as a group. So if you save it as a group, let's call it steel parts, and I can always get back to that search by going into this kind of middle window here and showing me my saved groups that I created. So if I create one group for steel, one group for aluminum, one group for other materials, I can kind of see which ones those are within the system. And for example, if I highlight a group, I can take a look at what parts exist for that group. I can, for example, go in and show where that part is in the structure, be able to quickly find it, whatever that part is. In the structure, if I, for example, go in here, I can also isolate. So for example, I can hide everything else and just see, okay, what is that part? If it's somewhere buried inside my snowmobile, what is it? So, okay, this is the part. So I can kind of, look at it, spin it. One of the nice things I like to do is to set the automatic spin center here, because that way, everything I click on will just kind of use my rotation anchor wherever I put it. So it's just kind of easier to visualize things. So that's one thing. I can just do a search. I can start grouping parts. And if I unhide all and go back to the main screen, let me minimize this a little bit here on my small screen here. So one of the nice things that you get in the MCAD is the ability to do a color-coded search. So this is one of my nice things that I typically do. I can preset a color-coded search using different criteria. So here I'm looking for parts made out of different materials, and I can run the search. This is going to scan my model and find the parts with those attributes. And then what I can do is I can color code them depending on what different materials they are. So here's a quick search that finds 83 components. Some of them are green, some of them are kind of this lighter color. I don't know if I have any blue ones here. But for example, for this assembly, I have all those parts that I found. Now I can also color code it in the tree. So there's an option here to color code everything. So now I can kind of scan all the parts, and it'll fade out everything else in transparency, but kind of highlight what parts it found. And if I go through the tree here, some of the parts in green. Now if I right click and show my query, right? So the green parts were steel. The blue, there was no nylon parts in this case, and the other kind of redder pinkish parts were made of aluminum. So those are only 3 materials I scanned for. So I can see, okay, these ones are green, these ones are kind of aluminum that I'm interested in. Now they may be in other levels of the assembly, but on the graphics side, I can kind of see those, and I can isolate only those ones. For example, that I color coded. So for example, if I select all of the same color, this green one, right, I can just say, for example, show me those components, and if I kind of select in the product structure, I can then isolate only those ones that I found that were steel, for example. So it kind of fades out the rest of my assembly. So now I can kind of go through and interrogate it. I can save my searches, my color-coded searches. Here I have one that's saved that just does materials. So if I have other attributes, so for example, if I have designers, so I want to know what my colleagues are designing, which ones they were responsible for, I can search based on parts that they've modified, they've designed, created. So I can see, if I have a group of designers responsible for one section of this product, I can kind of see who's responsible for those components, and understand if I modify or want to interface to those components, who I should be working with, who's responsible for that part. Other things, I can search for descriptions. I can, any kind of query that you make, you can then color code it using some of the MCAD functionality. So as I run through, and I'm going to bring back I'm just going to unhide everything, uncolor code everything, and just kind of go into the model. As I go through my ribbons up here, there are different things I can do with the viewer. So, searching, color coding, okay, I may not do that every day, but something I may do every day is, for example, explode things. So for example, I can take apart, there's a transformation toolbar, and I can just start exploding things as I need to. So for example, I can just start dragging components. Now this is a variant model, so this one is an overbuilt model with different seat variations, different tracks and feet in the front, for example. So make sure I grab the chair. So I can either do a directional explode or some kind of a explode that moves the component randomly. So that's a transformation toolbar. Once I start transforming something like this, I can also save this if I want to get back to it. So for example, in the MCAD, I have the ability to capture the locations of where I exploded these components. So if someone else looks at my snowmobile next time, it's not going to be the way that it was exploded in CAD. It was going to be the way that I exploded it, the way it is right now. And also this viewer is used in some of the manufacturing process planning. So if I'm creating work instructions for my routing steps, this also allows you to kind of move components around and show things that way. So that's also used in other areas of Windchill functionality. But in this case, I'm just going to kind of explode the components this way, show them. There's different rendering modes as well. So I can, kind of show it highlighted with edges, or I can show it shaded. There's different light scenes available. So if I don't, so in the basic versions of the viewer, like the Express and the Lite, I really can't do anything other than interrogate the model. But in the MCAD version, I can kind of choose different highlighting scenes on the model. I can also color parts. So for example, if I don't like that gray color, I can make this part a different color. So it, kind of stands out of my model. So the quality is not too good yet. It will update as I, kind of zoom in and take a look at this component, just the way the settings are set up. And again, you can publish this with different quality settings. If you want it super accurate quality, that just depends on how the model's been published from the source CAD tool. So typical things in my ribbon I have available. Now, the nice thing with this also is I can use this viewer to take things like cross sections. So I have a nice cross section toolbar that lets me kind of move through the model and take a look at what this looks like. Not only can I do just linear sections, I can do sections at an angle. Now, if I, for example, just take a look at, let's say, the front suspension, I want to take a look at what this looks like. I can put it through a specific plane or a specific geometry point, not just randomly dragging it like this through the whole model. There's options that allow me to select intersection options. So for example, I don't want to intersect everything. I just want to intersect and see this component. So I'm going to add that component to my So for example, everything else is not being cross-sectioned, but only that one component. And I know there's multiple components on here, so that is not the best example, but you can intersect only certain parts. You can also show 2D views. So in the MCAD version, I can show what that cross-section looks like. So for example, if I intersect that component at a certain plane, I can see what the 2D looks like. And I can also intersect it using a slider here that shows me what that intersection plane component looks like. Now, one of the things on this intersect plane is because this is a vector component, I have a markup functionality that allows me to, for example, measure lengths. So what is this intersected line here? So here it allows me to measure at that intersection geometry, what is the length of this, this edge, for example. If I move the intersection geometry, right, that edge may no longer exist. So that measurement is no longer valid. So that's this nice 2D window on the side is also part of the MCAD viewer functionality. If you just want basic cross-sectioning functionality, any viewer could do it in Creo View. Something else in this markup toolbar is the ability to do things like measurements. So for example, I want to measure what's the size of this arc or hole or circle or geometry, round, whatever that is. It's giving me measurements off of the 3D model. Now, there's a unit system in play depending on how this model was created, but I can always change it. So if I go down here, I can go into some of the Creo View options, and if I use the original that's been in the model, and I believe it is millimeters, but I can change it to other settings. So if I'm more familiar and looking at things in inches, then I can set the deselect this first one and select the measurement in my standard unit system. So for example, okay, this is approximately that value converted from millimeters. And I can do the same kind of measurement on other objects. I can do I'll just keep this measurement for now. I can do other measurements. For example, I can do mass property measurements. How much does this component weigh? If I've been putting accurate material assignments to those components. For example, this component here. And again, I'm going to change it to a unit that I might be more familiar with. Now, I don't know if any of these have assigned material properties to them, but some of them might give me information, especially the ones that have property materials assigned to it. That's component properties. I can also do summary properties on the whole component. So not only telling me what the volume is, what the weight is, and what the bounding box size, essentially, how big is it? So for example, I want to see, right, what's the bounding box size of this component here, roughly X, Y, and Z, right? So it's roughly 6 by 8.5 by 40 inches in size. Now for manufacturing, I might also want to get envelope sizes so that those same units, I might want to just kind of see, how much material do I need and what size do I need, for example, to manufacture this component or machine this component. So in this case, if production has access to this viewer in Windchill, and this is a component they can take a look at, they'll kind of see roughly and be able to plan for, okay, well, do I have enough material of this stock to be able to manufacture this? If I have this already approved for them to take a look at, some kind of a longer lead item that I'm releasing for production, they can actually go into Windchill, take a look at this viewer, and interrogate the model the way they want to, right? So this also has the potential to offload some of the work or preparatory work by engineers to provide information to others in the company. People can just have a viewer to look at things themselves that they've been given access to. So this is a nice toolbar for markups, for design reviews, for ECOs, ECRs, ECNs, engineering changes. I also have the ability to do free-form markups. So for example, I can draw shapes. I can, for example, draw leaders. I can put in notes. For example, just some note that I might want to emphasize to somebody if I'm sending them some details of this. Now, for example, I might customize my fonts, the way the arrows are displayed, the way the text is displayed, the colors, and things like this as a template. So then when I'm creating these over and over again, I'm going to use the same consistent template. So in the settings, I can preset all this stuff or change it on the fly as I need to. Now, this is a 3D model, so my annotations are kind of floating somewhere in space. And if I want to save the way that they're arranged, I can go into, for example, the orientations that come from the CAD model. I can also customize my own orientations of the model, so I can really get back to it later on as well. So here, for example, I just created this annotation. Now, in Windchill, I have the original model that has this structure. If I want to save this for others to take a look at, I have the ability to save this as an annotation set. So an annotation is essentially a markup on top of the 3D CAD model. It's not going to overwrite anything on your CAD model or drawings. So I'm going to save this annotation set. It's going to give me the ability to put a note, my ECN comments, for example, and that's going to allow me to save this as an annotation set into the model. So try it again. I've been editing the structure a little bit, so I'm not going to be able to save this the way it is because I've been editing that structure. So if I open up the model again, the one that I haven't saved because I captured the location of this model and I need to save this into the system. So I need to save that as a file back into Windchill. So for example, there's the ability to save this as a positional information back into Windchill in some cases. In my case, I'm not going to do that for this demo, but your annotation sets would appear here. So I can always bring back the annotation sets, or if someone else looks at it, they would bring back those annotation sets and be able to take a look at them. Not only can I look at the 3D models, but I can look at 2D drawings. So for example, if I go into my drawing and just open up any of these drawings, and I'll just open up for now just a simple version of a drawing in my viewer. I'm going to add it to the current session. You can launch multiple versions of the viewer, each with its own kind of window. But in my case, I'm just going to launch it to the same viewer I have open. And in this case, I'm going to launch a drawing of one of these components. So this is a drawing that is been published to a PDF, and this is the one sheet that I have of this drawing. So I can kind of look at the actual drawing itself. I can zoom in to the details of this drawing and get information about it. Nice thing with this being in Creo View is that I can also create a markup. So if I'm having a change and I want to, kind of mark something up here in my PDF, this flange is failing. For example, I can save that as a note. I can save that as an annotation set back into Windchill. So again, I changed the structure so it won't let me, but in my case, I can see now my drawing annotations on the side as well. So if I open up multiple windows, again, here I have this PDF that I opened, and I also have this 3D model that I was looking at before as well. So let me restore locations of every one of those components. Okay, I saved that so so now I have two windows open side by side, and I have the ability to interrogate both of those. Looking at one window or the other, I can bring one of them full screen. I can go back to the previous window. Here are all the windows that I have available. Now, this is for 2D drawings, for documents, for 3D models. Inside of this viewer, there's the ability to do animations as well. So one of the things with the animation module, which is an add-on to the Creo View MCAD, is I can do, you know, kind of positional animation, rotate things, explode parts, and create movies out of those. So for example, I can create movies and export those. So for example, if I just do something simple like dragging a component, I can play back that animation. And if I send this Creo View model to somebody else, they can also play back this animation, or I can export this animation in the movie format. So I can do things like MP4s within this viewer. In the CAD software, you can do also similar things, but if you don't have access to the CAD software, you can use this to do some of the animations as well.
Sorry, it's Deb. I think we're running out of time. There's a couple of questions in the chat. So I don't know if you can see that.
Sure, yeah, let's take a look at some of the questions. I hope this gave everyone a good overview, a basic overview of what Creo View is. So yeah, let's take some questions. So I'm using Creo View 10.1. One of the questions is what versions of Creo View and Windchill am I using? So I'm using Creo View 10.1 and Windchill 13. I believe it's 13.01. The viewer supports some additional functionality like quick view and things like this in later versions. But if you're using previous versions of Windchill, you can actually use higher versions of Creo View. So if you're running Windchill 12 or Windchill 11, you can actually use Creo View 10.1, which has been released with Windchill 13, to view models into your Windchill as well. So I haven't found a problem with that. Another question is, what's the difference between a PVS and PVZ file? The only difference is a PVZ file is a zipped version of a PVS, right? So when in Creo, files are created. So for example, in Creo, I can go save as, and this will create a PVS or PVZ. If I open up a PVZ, this is essentially a zip file. So a PVZ is a zip file of all your PVS. Now PVS is essentially like the assembly. All of your individual components are published into .ol files. So when I open up a structure, this is essentially a PVS file that tells it where to find all the OL files that have the individual part geometry. So as you know, PVZ is one file. PVS, you could have multiple PVSs, OL files for an assembly. So if you keep them in one folder, you're fine. But typically, you can just create a PVZ file and just have one file to manage. So for example, in my case, I just have one file. So here I have one file in one of my folders that's 640 megabytes. It's quite a big file. And if I open up that file, there's going to be thousands, potentially 1,700 models included in there. But for for managing these files outside of Windchill, it's just nice because it's just one file. So you can actually unzip it and open up the PVS file of the main assembly. The other question is something about higher end MCAD version. So if I go back into this kind of a technology stack, I have I have Creo View MCAD as kind of the base, and then the animation, the other functionality for interference analysis, design checks, PDF reviews, comparisons for ECAD, and so on. Those are additional modules that you can add onto MCAD. So not everyone needs Animator. You might be using MCAD, Creo View MCAD, but certain people only do animations. So only those would be able to have those modules. And again, they're FlexLM licensed. So just like your Creo, they could be floating, they could be registered to a user. So only those people would use those licenses when they needed them, or load them when they needed them, for example. Creo View Lite is not FlexLM licensed. So every viewer Windchill can download Creo View Lite without having to access a license server. That functionality is included with Windchill.
One quick clarification, it can be added as an a la carte license as well. It's just always included with Windchill, just FYI.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's right. If you're not using it with Windchill, it is a license that you can purchase.
So we've got about 1 minute. So if somebody wanted to contact TriStar for training or, on-site help, is that available?
Short answer is yes. We typically do a lot more mentoring sessions around this stuff, right? Depending on the use cases. And so I'd work with someone like Bogdan to kind of define the parameters of the training and what we want to do, right? And how we're going to deliver it. And then we could certainly put together mentoring or training or whatever you want us. We're very flexible on that.
Well, thanks. And yeah, I think just in the last week, I had gotten that comment on our Facebook or LinkedIn group asking who everybody uses for training and besides PTC University. So good to know that we've got you guys to help. So I'm gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much for TriStar, and the recording should work. It works about 95% of the time. It's possible I didn't put, click to do the recording and then it won't work at all, of course, but check our Facebook and LinkedIn group for the recording. And it's always nice that, you've heard it once, but then you can go back and say, now, what was he saying? Oh yeah, and then you can see the recording and it kind of sinks in more. So thanks everybody, and have a good summer.
Thanks, Deb.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone.